The classical view of intelligence, still upheld by Nietzsche in many passages. There are three types. The first type is unable to judge correctly on its own, but when more or less shown, and especially by someone they trust, often they get it at least enough to form a conviction around the thing. The second type, often these are lawyers and other unscrupulous types, are able to judge correctly. So Nietzsche often speaks of the people that are able to make a judgment correctly or not. And of Deutsch, I think this impersonal sense of judgment is stronger, maybe. So Nietzsche maybe more takes that unconsciously as clear. He may in some passage challenge it, but that doesn't mean all the time he was really acting as though he thought it were not the case. So there's types that can make the second types that can make the judgment correctly, but who, for the reasons that are behind judges recusing themselves in cases where they have an interest, can't be trusted to make the the way I would state it is their intellectual self-respect is less than their personal passions for gain. And then there's the third type, which is the type that has you could trust them to make the judgment correctly, even when life and death is in play, even in the most extreme case. Because their attitude, so that doesn't mean de facto in some certain situation they might not lie about a judgment. Might say, oh, I don't think there's going to be a war, when they know there's going to be a war. Because, I think it's so impossible, because it's, how could that be if so many lives have been lost? No, it could be also the ticking time bomb scenario or something. Maybe they would lie in order to, for some reason. It doesn't mean that they couldn't lie. So what does it mean that they could be trusted to make the judgment correctly? It could only have, in the full sense, it could only mean that they themselves would know the truth, although they might lie about it. Or in the case of, taken to the extreme, I guess there has to be cases where the third type is like the second type. But the second type, the motives, I think, are just usually lower. We could see in Socrates, you could say, what if Socrates, instead of taking the hemlock, had done as Plato in the obverse version shows. Is it a better version? I don't know. The reverse. He shows. He fluctuates. Plato allows us to fluctuate between two versions, between the version and be a little bit Dionysiac in this sense, and which calls the whole thing into question. It could fluctuate between the version. The model is Socrates, who admitted. So remember that one of the few humorous statements of Socrates. Socrates is in general sort of jovial, but one of the few direct humorous statements he made was at the time of his death, when his companion said to him, "Isn't it terrible, Socrates, you're being unjustly put to death?" And Socrates said, would it be better if I were being justly put to death? Socrates doesn't positively say that he's not being justly put to death, and in the Hegelian version, one says that he was justly put to death because it's a matter of the tragic forces in each side, and the people that said it's what I was calling before this sort of Spaltung Ereignis, a split eventing, is a genuine. This is how Hegel thinks it. And if you're involved in the direct political concerns, then I guess you could say, as a sorga, that's the direct datum of existence, not some other physicist account or something. Well, that's questionable. Okay, that's the public sorga according to the political life. I don't know. But okay, let's reset back to this question of, I'm just trying to fix the top part, the third part. So let's state it again just to be clear. The first part of intelligence classically considered is the one who probably really can't think that well, but maybe they could sort of, if they trust the person they're talking to and so on, they could sort of put down the foundations, and maybe they could build an edifying structure, which they could live by, or live in, dwell in, as it were, to use a Heideggerian way of speaking. There would be a dwelling space opened up in that ethos, sort of ethos. The second type can make correct judgments and is able to, for instance, I give an example of a correct judgment. It's correct to say when there's some kind of stochastical or statistical interpretation of an event. So like we say there's probability, expectation about an election. Then supposing one would say there's a 99% chance that this will happen according to this model. Now supposing the other thing happens, it's correct to say the model isn't demonstrated to be wrong empirically because it said there was a 1% chance the event could happen. But then it's left to remain what then somebody can go back and analyze and look at, these are the arguments they made, these are the reasons why they thought it was likely, the event was likely to happen, were they cogent reasons? And then you'd open up a whole new, there could be a whole discipline which would center itself around this kind of question, and it would learn a lot of interesting things, no doubt. But I think, again, in the third type, which is supposed to be both able to judge and not swayed by these type of the things that a judge would recuse himself for, type of thing, an investment in money, or some cherchez la femme, or follow the money, or something of the, or some similar consideration, that this would sway the judgment. And actually, so I suppose maybe what's meant there is that they actually would not be able to make the judgment and become confused because of the tension, maybe. But I think it would also means, I think it means it's more commonly taken to mean that they do make the judgment, but then they sort of conceal it from themselves and deceive themselves, or there's some combination of deceiving themselves and deceiving others about what they otherwise would have known if it weren't for those interests. passionate interest, acting upon them. The other type, it's more obscure with the logos type, as it were, because the logos type, I could still, it's not obvious that the Socrates has to always tell the truth, like in the sense of, like, did he actually render his opinion on whether he were put to death justly or unjustly? Justly in the sense that he was accused of deranging the youth, and he did derange the youth. Unjustly in the sense that it so turned out that the next generation said, it's actually good that he deranged the youth because it awakened these forces, and there's something revelatory in them. They have a revelation which we ought to keep to. And so it turned out that they accepted Socrates as an endowed chair in the university or something. And yeah, those two interpretations, justly put to death, unjustly put to death, by the Greek democracy. I don't know. It was probably supposed to be, I think, like 600 people or something like that, who actually wore the die cast on the day and cast their votes, which I suppose is a large sort of quorum, as it were. Yeah, I mean, I guess this is simply a problem of presentism, because anything that we really take up for ourselves genuinely is in some way a problem of presentism, though at the same time it's also a question for presentism whether it's generally adequate to say that no one can be an expert in everything, and therefore we're justified in leaving many things over to the expert, just to listen to the experts without really understanding them. Yeah, these and other conundrums, although very difficult, are not outstandingly to be heard in the key that says that it's impossible